lovable. I just continue to love mixing horror with Star Wars. And the best part of The Acolyte continues to be its incredible action sequences. But once the action stopped, I started to become, for the first time, very worried about where this series might be headed story-wise, and that it might actually not be headed anywhere at all. So let's discuss. There is actually quite a bit to discuss. So on the one hand, I'm very proud of Disney, golf clap, for finally mastering HBO's hit show formula, which was pioneered by the OG Game of Thrones, and which HBO is even struggling with now itself with the latest season of House of the Dragon. Side note, I cannot believe that in the span of just 2 days, both shows did a twist on The Parent Trap. I think it undercuts both. At least, thankfully House of the Dragon went first. But that's just crazy that they would both do that at the same time. I've been thinking that, while they're competing with each other, that the major studios, I was thinking just from a scheduling perspective, but now I think maybe a bit with story, they really kind of need to start checking with each other because they're just, they're hurting each other and therefore they're hurting the entire landscape. Although I also want to point out that I'm very also proud of Star Wars and Disney, that nothing leaked from these episodes. They'd only given up through 4 to the press, and you can see now why, because a lot of stuff, unfortunately, did leak from the first 4 episodes. And so it was very effective in that regard, because boy, were we surprised! But the overall formula that HBO pioneered with Game of Thrones is not just a 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time drop, extremely effective. I think we can all, I know some of you who do not live in North America are very frustrated with that drop time, but I think that, it does seem to be the most effective. And I think The Boys this season has suffered for abandoning that drop time. But anyway, you also have to have a shock value that gets people talking and makes the show feel like a must-see event. Like if you don't, you gotta see it when it drops, not only to avoid spoilers, but because it's a party. You want to be there when it happens. And this show, again, to its credit, this episode specifically had it. I hope they can continue to deliver because they've written a pretty big check with this episode. And so the final 3 are going to have to keep this up or, I think that, that the show will just backslide. Because, they have 3 more episodes to go. And on that note, when all the insanely cool lightsaber fighting was over, so cool, we're going to talk about it. But for the first time, as I said, I became concerned that while Leslie Headland seems to have a good grip on the smaller story, what happened 16 years ago on the planet Brendock, for the first time, as I said, I felt that maybe she might not have a good grip on when it comes to the bigger story of exploring the history of the Sith, back in the day when they, were not, they were operating really in secret. So to that point, good news, bad news, it seems the Acolyte will not be contradicting Star Wars canon and no one will survive to tell of the Sith sighting and that Mundy's inclusion was intentional and that years later, when he says no one's seen the Sith, he's just a typical bureaucrat who makes lazy and dangerous assumptions and presents them as fact in meetings. Because yes, it seems Jedi headquarters likely never will learn what truly happened, not just on Brendock, but on Kofar. As Sith Apprentice, it seems, Qimir is intent on leaving no witnesses. Does that mean that Sol, the sole surviving Jedi in this episode, won't make it to the end of the series? Will all 4 Jedi truly pay for their sins? Will they pay the ultimate price? One of you tweeted me last week after the last episode, because I was talking about Saul's clear connection to the dark side, and I said, these Jedi, 4 of them did something clearly very wrong, and that might have called out to the Sith. And one of you said, well, there's 4 of them, Grace. Maybe that makes them like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And I loved that. And I thought, again, this show would be able to deliver on that kind of level of sophistication. And now I'm getting nervous that maybe it will not. But I think Saul will either die, like the rest of his fellow Jedi from that fateful time on Brendock, or, and this is what I would prefer, he'll turn to the dark side. I think that's just so much more, infinitely more interesting. And Qimir even calls it out this episode. He's like, what did you do with your darkness? And I'm like, oh yes, I would like to know that too, Saul. I mean, Saul is such a great character. What it would be, I mean, I guess they, we had to say goodbye to Carrie-Anne Moss as well, but that was cool stunt casting. That was intentional to, and I guess, again, that was a good shock value as well. Although, again, one of the problems with some of the shockers on this show is that people are guessing them. People knew that it was Qimir probably. They guessed that Carrie-Anne Moss probably wouldn't make it out of the first episode. And so, I think that's why the Yord and Jecki deaths worked the best because, nobody had guessed that. We thought they for sure would survive. But yeah, so what would you prefer? Do you think Saul should go die with the rest of his group? Or would you like to see something else happen to him? But, clearly he can't go back to headquarters and file a report because that would mess up Star Wars canon. And so, yes, that's what concerns me. Is there a grander story here? Star Wars and the Marvel shows always get us with this. We feel there's a bigger play. And the reason they get us with this is because in the early days, there was a bigger play. But now that is no longer the case. And it always ends up being the low risk alternative with at best vague promises for another day. And I'm looking at you, Ahsoka season 1. We were like, oh, what's going to happen with Thrawn and Ezra Bridger? Nothing happened. Nothing. We have just 3 episodes to go. And I feel that this might be a story that ends up not having a big effect on the Star Wars universe overall. So then what was the point of this? All this awesomeness? Is it just going to fade away? Into the ether, right? Like it just, and might be like, well, the point is it's a good story, Grace. Well, this is a part of a franchise. And the reason that people become so invested in them is that we're supposed to be building something. I had the same comments about Andor, which was, 50% of Andor was incredible. The other 50%, in my opinion, not so much. And again, for all the praise that people are reaping on Andor, its ratings were in the toilet. All right, so I think the way things are going now, I think people are again correct in their guess that Darth Plagueis will likely be revealed at the very, very end of the show. He'll just waltz in and be like, hello, right? And be like, I was the true big bad all along. And then they'll cut to black, or he'll have like one cool fight scene. And then they'll be like, the Acolyte season 2 in 3 to 5 years. And you're like, why do you keep doing this to me? Again, as I said, Thrawn and Ezra Bridger were really big to bring over into live action, but we're still waiting for them to amount to anything. I mean, I think they're getting ready to do Ahsoka season 2, but Dave Filoni is distracted with his own movie now. Maybe they'll be in the movie. But I mean, this is just taking freaking forever. Why couldn't they have been cool in the series when they were introduced at first? All right, who is Darth Plagueis, for those of you who do not know? He was Palpatine, aka Darth Sidious's master, who was extremely powerful. One of the things he could do was manipulate life itself. Thus, Qimir's ability to heal that you see in this episode, which is why some people are guessing that perhaps Qimir is his, current apprentice. And I guess there's going to be an opening pretty soon for Palpatine. I don't think Qimir makes it out of this season alive, which I think a number of us are also already guessing. Palpatine, though, eventually killed his master. He killed Darth Plagueis in his sleep, a story he tells Anakin. He's like, half threat, half aren't I cool? But following the rule of 2. What's the rule of 2? Well, there can only be 2 Sith apparently at a time. What a crazy organization. Who would join that organization when it's guaranteed that someone's going to have to take you out? All right, so there can only be a master and the apprentice. That's to make sure that the Sith remain largely secret. And then for the apprentice to get a promotion, and to get his own apprentice, or acolyte, as Qimir says, he must kill his master to take his place, right? So Darth Plagueis, for instance, killed his master, Darth Tenebris. I guess that's why none of these Sith feel that bad about it, because this is just the way of the Sith. And so this makes me wonder, why did Qimir ask Saul if he remembered him? Was he talking about the apothecary from a couple episodes ago? Or is their past deeper than that? When he said that, I got real worried he was one of the witches. The Sith was one of the witches from Brendok. I was like, oh, this is going to really, that's going to push this show over the edge if that's what happens. So thank goodness it didn't. But so what is Qimir referring to? Again, as I said, I feel that Saul is somehow connected to the Sith, and he didn't have any interest in arresting Qimir, right? He wanted to kill him, which is kind of a Sith thing to do. And you might be like, well, the circumstances obviously were awful. But, for everything bad that was happening, to their credit, and it's very sad, Jecki and Yord never wavered from the path of the Jedi. Jecki was trying to arrest May, and Yord was following orders and doing his best. But Saul let his emotions get the best of him, which again is Sith behavior. But who is Qimir's master? With Qimir's identity revealed so early in the show, with 3 episodes still to go, that means he can't be the show's endgame. That's why so many are thinking Darth Plagueis is going to show up. And Qimir, let's face it, has the brash bravado of an apprentice, not a master. But how could he recruit his own apprentice / acolyte, May, while his master still lives? What about the rule of 2? Is it not in effect yet? But also, Qimir is saying, what does he want? He wants freedom to be able to be his Sith self. And so it seems that, Qimir is telling May to make the Jedi break their rules. Perhaps Qimir is breaking Sith rules. And maybe that's why Qimir will ultimately perish. Maybe his master will show up and be like, you're breaking a lot of the rules. Because it's funny, Qimir, I thought that was a good line when Qimir said, you can learn a lot from Jecki. She is a loyal apprentice, when he was talking to May. But I'm like, Qimir, you don't seem that loyal to your master. So, again, what goes around comes around in the world of the Sith. Also, I gotta say, I also agree with Qimir. How could May not know who she was actually working for? He was like, I'm surprised you didn't guess it. And we're all like, we're all surprised. Because it seemed pretty obvious to all of us. We were like, it's Qimir or Coral. But again, we know we're watching a show. But still, May spent a lot of time with both Qimir and her master. And didn't she realize she never saw them at the same time? And that they have kind of similar physicalities, right? Although where was Qimir hiding those arms? We'll talk about that. But they also both like to monologue, right? She's like, oh my God, these guys love to listen to themselves talk. Wait a minute. I think it hurts the character of May that she didn't put 2 and 2 together herself, or at least have her suspicions. She just makes the character seem foolish. So yeah, these are my concerns now. I have concerns. And also, as cool as he is, these Sith men, hello there. But his dialogue is truly awful, particularly in this episode. I was like, oh my gosh. Not Manny Jacinto's delivery, by the way. That continues to be excellent. I like his performance quite a bit. But the dialogue that's been written for him, I am not a fan of. He's like he's a Sith Ken doll. He sure likes to hear himself talk and play guitar at you. You're like, ah. All right, so now, is episode 5 of The Acolyte Star Wars' version of the Red Wedding? I saw some people saying that last night on social media. Well, kind of yes and no. So the Red Wedding was a season 3 episode. That's crucial. And it killed off 2 major, very popular and well-established characters who'd been around since season 1. So I don't think The Acolyte could accomplish the same level because, we didn't even finish season 1 here. I must say, I felt Yord's death the most. I actually gasped out loud when that happened. I was shocked that happened. It was such a brutal, and not even like a Jedi death. It was awful. But also at the same time, quite a powerful scene because of that. We knew the other Jedi who didn't have names were red shirts. Shout out to Galaxy Quest. Your character doesn't even have a name. You're going down. But to see Yord and Jecki taken out, as I said, was really shocking. Both were gaining fans, by the way. They were becoming popular. But they weren't around long enough to truly cement themselves in the world of Star Wars. And again, I don't think Qimir will be either. Although no one's ever going to forget his entrance last episode and his fight scenes in this episode. At least he has that. But I think particularly with Yord and Jecki, since they died so quickly, their death becomes the sole reason for their existence in the first place, and therefore undercuts the characters. The Red Wedding was earned. And while this is certainly very shocking and cool, I would not say it was earned. Maybe, hopefully, whatever happens with Soul is earned. All right, but let's talk about those fight scenes. Probably, as I said, the best we've seen in live-action Star Wars to date. And consistently, the best thing about this show has been its action sequences. We've got vibranium and adamantium over in Marvel, and now we've got our own special metal here in Star Wars, cortosis. That's what Qimir's awesome helmet is made of, which can not only withstand a lightsaber blade to a point, and also Jecki was able to eventually break it, but it also shorts out lightsabers. That's what was going on there, and that's extremely useful, as you can see. It also seems to withstand Jedi mind powers. When Qimir's like, I ain't taking off my helmet so you can read my mind, and I was like, right out of Magneto's playbook. It's an extremely rare metal, of course it is, but I can't believe that it hasn't been used more in the world of Star Wars to date. It's apparently very popular in the comics and in the extended universe and stuff like that, but, you would think it would have shown up before now in some of the shows or movies, because it's very effective when fighting Jedi. I mean, this might as well have been a Cortosis commercial. And every Sith watching is, and anyone who takes on the Jedi is like quickly reaching for the phone to dial that 1-800 number. I mean, like, it was incredible. Thankfully, 2 of my biggest fears did not come true this episode. One, that we would miss the fight. Some of you said last week, oh, I bet we missed the fight. And I was like, they wouldn't do that. And then when the episode started and Osha woke up from being knocked out and it seemed that the fight was over, I was like, oh no, did they do that? But they didn't. The fight was going on. And I thought it was cool actually entering the battle like midway like that. Cause then you had to like catch up just like Osha was. But then also, of course, that the mysterious Sith was not one of the witches from Brendok like Coral. I still think she's probably alive though. Or maybe she's not. Now I feel maybe she's not. Like, we all have these exciting theories for these franchises, and the specific theories don't have to come true. Part of the fun of the game is whether or not you can guess it. But the movies and shows then have to present very good alternatives to still live up to the hype. That's the way this works. And that's one of the things I think that Marvel and Star Wars, for some reason, particularly under Disney leadership, is not understanding. Qimir has some incredible moves. I mean, he really made this episode. Kudos to Manny Jacinto and also his stunt double for executing these action sequences. They were just very, very good. And I keep saying that this is the best lightsaber fighting we've seen in live action. And I'm qualifying it because I still think that overall, Star Wars Rebels has the best lightsaber action sequences. And again, if you have not seen that animated series, and thank you to everyone who insisted that I check it out, those fight sequences are still the best. They still set the bar for what I hope to someday see in live action. But we're getting close. We're getting very close. The combo of lightsaber moves and force use is beautiful to watch. And Qimir doing the double impale, using the force was one of the standouts. Also, the way he poked all those holes in poor Jecki. I mean, wow. And again, as I said, where was he hiding those arms? It's also nice to see Star Wars get a proper villain. Again, I don't think he's going to last very long, but at least we got to see him for a little bit, because Disney has also created a real villain problem for both Star Wars and Marvel, in that the villains are now always watered down, pull their punches, and don't stick around that long because they're always so easily defeated. Again, I don't expect Qimir to last past this season, which, hopefully he at least gets the chance to shine 1 or 2 more times. Although at least one of you tweeted me, though, that you thought this was too dark for Star Wars. Only one of you said that. But I still thought that was an interesting reaction, because I was like, oh, that's the best part of this episode. But these are now family franchises. And, since they're so large, is there space that can be like adults only? Deadpool and Wolverine is going to test that later this summer. It's an interesting question. It's also like, we're always like, why can't we get more women to watch the Star Wars and Marvel? Maybe these are family franchises, whether we like it or not. I mean, there are some truths that that just remain constant, again, whether we like them or not. I also loved seeing the dance of the different color lightsabers deep in the woods. It had a magical, epic feeling to it, which is what I like in my lightsaber battles. I was like, that sure is cool. That's beautiful. When Osha looked over and saw that in the distance, I was like, wow, that's so cool. And they managed to make it seem very scary, even though it was also so beautiful and colorful. Lots of inventive lightsaber use, not only with the force use, but a lot of double lightsabers. Always loved double lightsabers. Although I was surprised and a little disappointed that Jecki, that when she took up Kelnaka's lightsaber, it was the same color as her own. I think it would have been better if they were different colors to emphasize that she was fighting with a dead Jedi's weapon, fighting for her life. Instead it just seemed like she had two blades as well. So I think that would have emphasized it. It was nice to see Daphne Keane, aka X-23, speaking of Marvel, get to show that she still got it when it comes to action scenes, even if it was for just one episode. Also, Keane has been doing interviews over the past week saying that in the last episode, Jecki was attracted to Osha in their conversation. There was a vibe there. And so when she took on May this episode, Osha's identical twin, I wondered if that would be a factor. It would cause Jecki to pause maybe at moments because she was fighting the exact image of the woman she was attracted to. But to Jecki's credit, she ended up being a true professional. I would think that would come into play even a little bit, though, that she would have to fight that and overcome it. But the show just doesn't have the time. with 30-minute episodes, so many credits. I couldn't believe how early in the timeline this episode ended. They were like, and now 10 minutes of credits. And you're like, don't count that in the time on the episode, please. If you're going to have the credits because of all the dubbing run for that long, it should not count in the time because it's just frustrating. But they don't have enough time to truly explore some of their really good ideas. And I think that's why some of the good ideas don't hit the way that they should, because again, the show doesn't have the space to properly execute them. Did Pip also die? Is this programming only in his head? Remember Osha ripped off his head and was like, I'm sorry, Pip. And you're like, wait a minute, why are we killing Pip? Because, for what? Although his head did land on the ground and now near Osha, because now May switched places with her. But for how much they built up those bugs in the last episode and this one, it was sort of lame that Qimir emerged pretty much totally unscathed after a bunch of them lifted him up into the air. I mean, I guess he healed himself maybe, but I'm like, come on, man. He's not even severely scratched up. I was like, we didn't need to kill them. They're not that bad. Speaking of Osha and May, it's kind of crazy how suddenly they're sidelined in their own story. You're like, wait a minute, wasn't the show about them? They're like, no, it's about Qimir and Saul, or maybe another unyet to be revealed player. So it was just weird. You're like, you only have 8 episodes, and now for 2 of them, May and Osha are kind of again, as I said, getting sidelined. I thought the scene where May and Osha finally got to talk had some nice moments. There was a shout out to the famous Anakin line of, Anakin had said that Obi-Wan and the Jedi had turned Padme against him. And, here May says that the Jedi have turned Osha against her. I'd be like, stop riding Anakin's coattails, man. I mean, you guys are uncomfortably close to him as it is already. And I'm trying to defend it, but I'm like, you gotta back off Anakin a little bit. But to me, my favorite moment in their conversation was when May begged Osha to not yet again choose the Jedi over their sisterhood. That I thought was very nice. It got me in the feels. I liked that. And it was unique to them. And to Amanda Stenberg's credit, she continues to not just do a good job differentiating the 2 twins in terms of personality, but body language as well. However, on that note, May, as the character, is not an actress because she continues to act very May-like even after she cut her hair and has Osha's civilian clothes on. I also did like it when Saul shouted, get the civilian back to the ship, I liked that. It almost made the Jedi for a moment seem like special forces. I was like, oh, that was pretty cool. But anyway, how does Saul not realize that that's May? I would think that he would. I mean, maybe he's just very disoriented and shell-shocked. Maybe that would explain it. But even the way that she was walking once they got into the ship, I was like, that's May. So it was cool from an acting standpoint for Amanda Stenberg, but then also you were like, she's totally giving herself away. Also, Basil's onto her because, of course, he was given May's scent to track her, and he's like, oh, there she is. I hope he doesn't meet too grisly an end. Because for all her talk about wanting to be good now, May is still very clearly a killer. I was like, you haven't learned anything. Because when she was fighting Jecki, she was fighting to kill. She wasn't just trying to stop her. I was like, you haven't changed at all, May. Which, Osha kind of says to her, which I also thought was interesting. I do respect the show for not totally changing May. May can have the idea that, wouldn't it be great to make all my problems go away? But, at heart, she's, there's still the problems that always existed between the 2 of them. I thought that was good. And Qimir has to know that's Osha. Not only does she have that tattoo for starters, although who knows how close he was with May, but I mean, he was able to tell right away that it was Osha and not May back in the apothecary. So he must know. So action-wise, the Acolyte once again delivers in spades, very impressively. But I think the story is starting to fall apart. And I worry that this whole journey might end up being pointless. And that while at first this seemed like a show that was going to take risks and have consequences, it's going to end up having all the flaws and be just as toothless as all the other Star Wars live-action content that has also ended up disappointing us. I really hope they stick the landing. I'm nervous. All right, so what did you think? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.